I'm Nancy Margolis. I'm the director of the Nancy Margolis Gallery, and I want to welcome you to our first Zoom online gallery talk. I want to introduce first the assistant director at Nancy Margolis Gallery, Lillian Day Thorpe.
Ferne Jacobs was born in 1942, and she lives and works in Los Angeles, California. She received her MFA from Claremont Graduate University in 1976. Jacobs has been featured in solo and group exhibitions throughout the United States and abroad. She was awarded the National Endowment for the Arts Fellowships in 1973 to 74 and 1977 to 78. Jacobs is the recipient of the Flintridge Foundation Award for Visual Artists, and in 1995, she was named a Fellow of the College of Fellows by the American Craft Council. Jacobs' work can be found in numerous public collections, including the Smithsonian National Museum of American Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Arts and Design, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the D. Young Museum, and the Rhode Island School of Design. And now I will turn it back to Nancy Margolis.
When I first met Ferne, she had already established herself as a leader in the fiber textile field, setting herself apart from others in the field through her innovative approach to her work. It's hard to believe that this first connection occurred more than 30 years ago. I became her art dealer, an admirer, and close friend. Drawn to her unusual sculpture, I was also equally drawn to her depth, original thinking, and poetic expression. As the years passed, the creative spirit never diminished. It remained new and fresh. I was grateful to have watched this happen, and it is my pleasure today to exchange thoughts with you this afternoon, Ferne, about your art and career. And so I'm going to move to the first question that I'm going to ask you. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. At what point did you decide to become an artist? What triggered the recognition that art, more than anything else, would become central to your life?
Well, I think we've talked a little bit, and as I was growing up, I was very drawn to working with my hands. And I started in like Girl Scouts. There was a leader she loved making things, and I got really close to her, and I was embroidering whatever she brought, I would do. And I carried that on through school, all through school. I would always try to do the drawings. I would never write. I don't think I wrote a paper the whole time I was in school. And I just would do drawings or make things. And somehow I got myself, I did not grow up in a family that had any interest in art, but I found this teacher in high school and I learned how to draw. This was after school, this was at night. I would drive myself to this man's studio. And then I got myself into art school and I started painting. It was so long ago, I can't tell you what did it. It just happened, it did it. And then I was slowly led to fiber. And at some point, I think I talked about with you, and now I have to talk about it with everybody. I just happened to walk into a studio, and it wasn't even an open store or anything. And there was a loom, and there were weavings, and I was painting at the time. And I just fell in love with these weavings, with the thread and the smell, and just and gave up painting and started weaving. And then sort of it just became a path that I began to follow. And I could say one more thing about the dream, that I had this dream.
Oh, yes, yes.
That we were going to Europe. I was going to learn how to weave. I came back took painting and weaving, gave up painting, went to weaving. And I went to Long Beach State. I started meeting people. I took different classes. I really never enrolled in college. I took weaving. I audited weaving at Long Beach State. And Joan Austin had been to Haystack. And Haystack is this incredibly beautiful school on an island in Maine. And I said, I'm going to go there. I want to go there. And I went there. I met Olga Amaral and I met Jack Larson that summer. And I was in my early 20s. And I asked Olga, should I go to school or should I get a loom and go to work? And Olga is this, I mean, she's an international renowned fiber artist. She lives in Colombia. She said, get a loom and go to work. And I did that. I got the loom, I went to work, except that when you're young, and I don't know, there's this experience of wanting to be an artist, but having trouble getting to work. You know, you want to work, but you know, till you get there. And I would do it, but not totally committed. And then I had a dream, and it was about being at Haystack, and I'd already been at Haystack. And the dream was that the director of Haystack was standing in the studio next to a huge white canvas. I mean, it took up the whole space, a whole wall. And I was in therapy at the time, and I brought the dream to my therapist, and he said, he's telling you to get to work. And somehow that dream and that therapist saying, he is telling you to get to work, something in me was telling me to get to work. It changed my life, and that totally landed me in my work. And I became totally devoted and committed to it, and to this day.
Well, Ferne, I'd like to ask you another question. Who was the most influential figure or figures in your life, and how did these figures affect you and your career? I think that most people that I've talked to who are in the arts or they have a career, there is somebody who they connect with that makes such a difference in their life and changes their path sometimes. Would you talk about?
Well, I definitely think that happened to me. And as I said, I didn't go to college, but I found teachers. But I want to say the first one. My daughter is here and she's gonna laugh. I have to say it was Bob Dylan. and the reason I say Bob Dylan is because I was so young. I mean, this was his first concert in LA. He played the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. And here's this guy who comes on stage with a guitar and a harmonica, and that was it, just him. And he was pretty small and slender. And by the end of the concert, I felt so moved. The whole audience was so moved, like we had seen something really profound. And what it gave me, watching him perform that night, I saw an individual serving something that was so deep and so uniquely to him. And I wanted to do that. I said yes. Yes to that. This is what I saw, and I said yes. And then I had two favorite weavers in the country. One was Dominic DeMar, and I found out that he was on the West Coast, and Lenore Tawney, who was in New York. Because Dominic was on the West Coast, I don't know why, I got up the nerve to write to him. Somehow I thought I had his address. I ended up writing to his cousin, and his cousin passed it on to him. And he was at a time in his life where he was changing techniques, and he wanted to teach somebody what he had learned. And I became that person. I went and I met with him. This was in around 1967. And I spent a whole day with him, and I was so shaken by that experience. Learning the technique was not the answer, because I made work and we both agreed it looked too much like his work, and I never showed that work. He taught me what it's like to be an artist, because he had committed his life to being an artist. I didn't know anybody who was an artist, really. And I saw what it took. I saw you make sacrifices, and I saw the meaning of it. through meeting him. And we became very close friends, and we're close friends to this day.
What about Lenore?
And Lenore.
Lenore, how does she?
I waited 10 years to meet Lenore. I waited 10 years.
Tell the audience who Lenore is.
Well, if you're at all involved with textiles, you have to know who Lenore is. Lenore was like the mother of weaving for the 20th century. I mean, she started weaving around in the 1950s, and she was the greatest. I mean, in terms of art, I mean, Annie Albers was amazing. Annie Albers came too far before me. I would say Annie Albers in terms of art, and then Lenore. But for me, Lenore was the one. I mean, Annie Albers was probably dead by the time I became aware of fiber art. And I worked for 10 years, and she was great. I mean, she did incredible. I mean, she was like a grande dame. I mean, she was like a huge figure. And I started seeing things that I thought we would connect. We were in an exhibit together, and her piece was my favorite in this whole big exhibit. And she did some writing, and I thought, you know, we really think similarly. So I know I was going to be in New York. It was 1975. And I called another fiber artist, and I said, have you met Lenore Tawney? And she said, I have met her. And she made me very uncomfortable. I said, okay. But she said her phone number is in the phone book. So I said, okay. And I called her. And I was already exhibiting. So she, I think, had seen a piece of mine at the Cleveland Museum, and she invited me over. And that was quite an experience, because she was in a loft, you know, before Soho was ever developed. She was in a loft. It was a manufacturing area. And I walk into this elevator, and it's a freight elevator. And I think, okay, I can compose myself on the way. You know, I'm going to end up in a hallway. I can compose myself. No, you're in the elevator. It opened up right into her loft. And she's standing right in front of me. And she's short. And she's got these piercing eyes, piercing at me. And I'm just looking at her, and I went, oh my God, you know. So she invites me into the studio. She says, I want to have a peach. I said, okay. So she sits down with her peach, never asks me if I want anything to eat. And I sit, and she says, well, you can look around. And I started, and I said, no, I'm going to wait for you. So I sat, and I watched her eat a peach. When she was done, we got up, and we spent the whole afternoon walking around her studio, looking at all her work and talking about it. And really, from that day on, we became very close. And I have to say, what she gave, I mean, she gave me so much, but knowing her, she was the most unique individual person I've ever known in my life. She had incredible wisdom. She had real wisdom. And she also was kind of crazy and foolish and really very human. And she was, 30 years older than I was? I mean, I don't even want to think about it now. I met her maybe when I was in my 30s. She was 65. I knew her till she died, which she was 100.
Okay, we're going to go on to the next question. I want to just bring up some about your work and how you start your work, and reflecting on the motivations behind your work. When I first, this is a quote of something you wrote. It's not very long. When I work, I enter a mysterious place where I do not know where I am or where I will end up. There is some hidden reality to find. It is always present. It is up to me to remain open to it. And can you talk about that statement?
Sure, because I've been thinking about it. It's a recent statement. I want to say one more thing about Lenore. To have somebody that you can talk to, as I could talk to Lenora, was very special, about art, about life, about the meaning of life, about so just everything. I just want to say that that's why that relationship was so important to me. In my work, I was reading that again myself. I'm going to look at it as I talk, because
It's in the catalog too.
I'm at the end of the catalog. When I reread it, I thought it is always present, which is true. It's always present. It's up to me to remain open to it. When you remain open to it, it sounded like you find this pure vision, which you don't. It can be very chaotic. It can be very messy. So it is this idea of when I start a piece, I have a color in mind and I have a size. And I kind of can see the piece in my mind. And while I'm working on the piece I'm working on, I kind of can see the next piece and it kind of forms in my mind. But it changes. It keeps changing. But the size sort of remains and I get a color. Then once I start it, I start with a line. I just start wrapping a cord.
Do you have that?
I just have a little cord here. This is the cord I use. So I will take a thread and I'll cut the thread and I'll put a needle at the end, which I'm not going to do. Well, let's see. I'm not going to put the needle on right now.
Yeah.
But what I do is I start wrapping, and this is the thread I wrap with. It's that simple. And I start wrapping around this cord. So what I create, here's this little bit of wrapping. I create a line. I end up creating a line. And I just start playing with the line. And then I can connect it anywhere. I can make connections wherever I feel like making them. And then I just start working with that, whatever is there. And I build on it very slowly. And what I mean by a mystery is I have no idea what this is going to be. And I enter this space, but there are things there. There are just things there waiting to be discovered. That's what I mean. It's always present. If you listen, you have to listen. And my whole relationship with my work is to listen to what's there, to build on the moment. And I never know what it's going to look like when it's done. I don't know until the last finished stitch what I actually created.
Now, when you first started, the coloration that you were using, well, there were neutral tones, right? And then
Well, I would go back and forth, actually. But when I started using the wax linen thread pretty regularly,
why don't you tell them about the thread, where it came from, how you got it?
Actually, it's a wax linen thread that's used for carpet laying. Excuse me. When I worked with Dominic, maybe I'm gonna have a little water. When I worked with Dominic, I don't know how he found it, but he found this wax linen thread that had more plies, that was thicker. And I happened to run into it. I was taking a rug, one of my rugs, to be repaired, and there was a local repair place where they repaired rugs. And I saw this thread on the table. This is it, right here, this thread. And I asked them where they bought it. Where did you buy this thread? And there was a carpet laying place maybe 2 miles away, like in my neighborhood. And I went and I bought that material and I used it forever. I mean, they recently went out of business. They stopped making it. But I couldn't believe it's the only place in the country I've ever found this material. And all the teaching that I did, all my students bought the material from this carpet laying place in Echo Park. LA, Los Angeles.
Okay, so is there anything else related to your process that we didn't cover yet?
A lot. Do you want, I mean, I can talk about the process. I brought out a couple of pieces.
Why don't you show them? And
This is a large piece that I'm working on. Let's see, can you see? So this is going to go all the way. See, I mean, I just know that I'm going to build around here and it's going to come down. And I don't really not sure how far it's going to come down, but they're going to be almost like, I want to say like horizontal ribs coming out, but maybe they'll come up or go down or around. So I'm now coiling this. So I just showed you coiling is this wrapping technique. So I have a core and I have the wrapping thread and I have a needle on the end of my wrapping thread. So that's all I do is I wrap 4 times. I wrap 4 times. And it's 1 stitch right after the next. So it covers the core totally. And then I take the needle and I make a connection to the previous row. So when you see my work, and you see all the lines on top of the wrapping, those are all the connections. So there's thousands of wraps and thousands of connections. So this is coiling. And then I sometimes go to twining. And I brought out a piece that this is all coiled down below, down here. And then I'm twining the top right now. And twining can be so messy. I mean, there's an order to the threads. It's just weaving, but it's very hard to see the form. If you can see, I've got all these threads around, and it's very hard for me to tell what the form is actually going to look like. And
you know this is going to work out. I know you take great risks when you do your work because you can start it in one direction and you don't know if it's going to look good.
I have no idea. In fact, right now I'm thinking, oh my God, what did I do here? This needs to go out. Why am I making it go up? And now I'm trying to say, okay, you have to go out. This has to go out. And I lay in the threads before I have any idea what I'm going to do with them. I have no idea. So anyway, but this is a twining is a weaving technique. See if I can just get it here. So you know how you play with a rubber band around your fingers, you know, you go like this and you kind of bring the thread around your fingers, you know, sort of like that. That's what twining is. But I'm twining around all these little, I'm not twining around my finger, I'm twining around all these little threads. And I don't even know how many threads there are.
Fern, now these aren't, Fern?
Yeah.
These aren't stitches that you invented. Aren't they traditional?
Totally traditional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how all your baskets are made.
All are made like that. All are made from the same. And knotting. I also knot, which is kind of a macrame stitch where I also knot. Those are the 3 techniques that I use.
And did you find where you used the neutral colors for quite a while, didn't you? I wondered what happened when you started with the color threads. Did it change how you worked, or did it change the complexity?
I don't know. You'd have to judge that, I think, for yourself. I think I'm looking at one of the very colorful pieces right now. That's all I remember because I'm not doing this now. Like with a piece like this, where there's tons of color. I mean, umpteen amounts of color in this. I saw a piece by Kate Anderson, and she had all this color, and I couldn't see. because the thread was used for carpet laying, there was very little interest in developing colors. Now there's another company that does make a lot of colors. There's a Wexland, and now that there's a lot of colors. But when I started working, there were very basic colors, because the thread was used for sewing carpets together, pieces of carpets together. You never saw the thread, you know, so it just had to blend in kind of with what was being made. So what I did, you can, if you see here, I don't know if you can even see this, but what I started doing was unplying different colors and then putting them together. So you'll see a pink and a yellow here, and then you'll see maybe a, let's see if I can get that on there. Here's sort of a green and a kind of dark red. I started making these skeins, mixing colors together, and some of the pieces have hundreds of colors, just hundreds of colors. But I started making circles and then connecting the circles, and that came in shortly before all the color. You can see all these circles, maybe here, there's a circle here, right here, here, and I just started connecting them. And for some reason that went along with the period of time when I was using a lot of color. Now I'm back to kind of quiet colors.
You are.
Yeah. A phase seems to end and another one starts. And I can't tell you what brings me from one to the next, because I'm already too far into this.
Well, what I want to do right now is I have another question. This will be the last question. This is something that happened to me that I want to pass on. Several years ago, I overheard the well-known textile designer Jacqueline Lawson comment, "If you follow your heart and dreams, you will never go wrong." Those wise words continue to reverberate and resonate for me many years later. So my question to you is, when you first started as an artist, what were your dreams? Did you follow your heart? And would you share some of your thoughts and feelings about these early dreams? My assumption is you had them.
My way of looking at my life is that I followed a thread. I followed a thread, kind of this imaginary thread. Excuse me. As I said, I started because I liked working with my hands. Somehow, I never knew where I was being led, but I followed. Something just came into being, like starting to work with fiber. I mean, I went to art school. I know that I wanted to do something in art, but I knew nothing about art. I started art school in layout and design. But the minute I got there, I saw that you could take painting, and I went, okay, that was the end of layout and design. I was going to go into painting. And then walking into the studio out of nowhere and seeing this loom and seeing this thread and these weavings, somehow that affected me. I have followed what I am affected by. And I have been lucky to have these experiences that led me where I needed to go. And I'm so thankful for that. And that's what's happened.
Ferne, thank you very much for sharing your life and your work. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Lillian.
Okay, sounds good. So now if anybody has a question or a comment, please feel free to raise your hand and I will unmute you and call on you.
That works, yes.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Hello, thank you. I Thank you so much. That was fantastic. And I was wondering if I could ask you, Ferne, about how you know that a piece is finished. And maybe to use that as just a jumping off point, you had talked about that you get started and you never quite know where it's going. And I thought we all might enjoy hearing a little bit more about how you approach the end.
Well, I'm near the end in this one. I'm near it. How do I push?
How do you know you're near the end?
It can't get too much higher. If it gets too much higher, it's going to be totally off balance. Okay. But I know that I'm going to finish the top and I might have to make the bottom longer. It's to find the balance. It's to find somehow some balance in this thing. I'm beginning to see the shape. I mean, I can see the shape now, and I can see where it needs to move in one direction or another direction. Knowing the end is very hard. I never know the end. Actually, there have been a couple, this is rare, but there's been a couple of pieces that after they came back from an exhibit, I actually worked on them more. I was shocked that I did that because I usually never do that. Usually it's done and I just live with it. You know, I take the risk, I finish it off. But now I'm seeing that even when I think it's done, I can add on sometimes. And sometimes I'll do that. I'll keep working. So maybe you're never sure, you know, but you have to take the risk that, yes, this is going to be it's a risky deal. The whole thing is a risk. I think for those who are willing to do it, it's so rewarding. I love being in a mystery. I love not knowing what I'm doing because I always learn something new. From each piece is so new. No piece looks the same. And God forbid if it did, I'd be very upset and I would do something to throw it off to make myself miserable because then it becomes interesting. If it's too easy, it's not interesting. And then it can become too hard and then it's painful, but it's worth it. I think it's worth it to be in pain rather than to be bored, you know, to be bored because you know too much.
Ferne, you have a few more questions. Let's see, Marina Post asked, did you dye your own thread when you were working in color?
No, I've never dyed thread. That's too overwhelming. It would destroy the whole thing for me. I mean, people do. I mean, maybe some people love to dye more than anything else, you know, dye the thread. No, I love buying manufactured thread. I'm very content with that.
Okay, another question. Let's see. Nomi asks, how do you know the physics of the balance?
How do I know what?
The physics of the balance. I think that means, how do you know when you're working on a piece that it will stay upright? If it's a pedestal piece and not a wall piece.
Or the visual balance.
Right, right.
That's a big, well, listen, you don't know the problem's making me. I start in the middle. I started somewhere on this, in the middle, okay? I work up and I work down. The hardest problem is getting, first of all, they don't have bottom. If they had a bottom, if this had a round bottom, it would stand. Then you just don't go high enough where it's gonna topple over. But when you're working and there's no bottom, I have to get it even enough at the bottom that it's gonna stand fairly upright, that it's not gonna lean, okay? Because a lot of times it wants to lean and I have to work and work and work to get it to stand straight. And visually, to make it visually balanced, I mean, that's the struggle of an artist, you know, to see how one side is functioning. You know, I go from one side to the other. I go from the top to the bottom, and maybe I'll work up one section, and then I come back and say, okay, now you better start working up this section until it gets to the point where from all sides, it somehow makes sense, enough sense that I can say, okay.
Okay, we have another question. So Hani asks, do you work on multiple pieces at a time?
No, I work on one at a time. And I can work on it for months. And, excuse me. The only time I change, let's say I'm going to New York and I'm working on a large piece at home. I always work. I work wherever I am. So if I go on a trip, I take work. And if it's too large to travel with, I'll start a small piece and I'll travel with that. And when I come home, I'll either finish the small piece, which is what I'm doing now, actually, the black piece I started. And then when that's done, I'll go back to the large piece and I'll work on that until it's done. One at a time. And sometimes my students have complained about that to me. But for me, listen, I'm wrapping. What difference does it make if I'm wrapping on one piece or another piece? I like being involved with that piece every day of my life, because then I stay intimately involved and I'm very close to it. Mm-hmm. And what creates the work is this close relationship with me and something within myself. This dialogue that goes on. And working on that every day keeps that dialogue very, very close and open.
Thank you. We have a question from Desert Weavers. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Fern. It's Carol Listenberger from Palm Springs. I took a class with you a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And
hi.
How are you doing?
I'm okay, and you?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm really enjoying the coiling, and I've been working on some pieces. And I just wondered, this is something I might have asked you before if I had done more of it, but now that I have done more of it, I'm starting to think about incorporating wire and wrapping the wire because I make jewelry a lot. And I just wondered if you had ever done anything other than wrapping the jute. Have you incorporated any other structures underneath the linen?
No, no, but other people have. And I'm sure you could see it. I mean, the thing is, I love working with thread. People that are comfortable working with wire. And if you're comfortable working with wire, you'll find a way. You'll find a way to do it.
I really like it. And I still like doing it with the jute too. And actually, I kind of like both of them together. I was just curious if you had ever gone that direction.
No.
Okay, thanks. Hey, your show is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Alexandra wrote, a human life has many shifts and movements. How has the work process changed for you, if it has? And what is it like to work now than, say, in the beginning or middle of your commitment to this work? What do you rely on to maintain balance, or is that coming from the work process as well? So I think the first part of the question was, how has your process changed for you over the course of your career, if it has?
It hasn't. You know, I think I've said, I have this image in my head. It's like this piece that is always there, and yet it's always in movement, it's always changing. And my relationship to it is to keep exploring that process. This process of movement, this process of this creature, whatever it is, that I can see it now. I mean, I can see it in my head. This figure that is there, but in constant movement, like a whirling dervish, you know, or, but it moves in so many different ways, in so many different directions. And that's, each piece follows the current place of that movement. It's like I go into this mystery and I bring this form that sort of is created out of the mystery. It's like making the mystery into a shape. And the process, can you believe this? I've been doing this for 50 years. The process is the same, but it's so different because every moment is different. I can't even go back. I can go back and look at another piece, but it doesn't answer the current question. And the current question means that I am living in this present moment within this piece that I am making. And it gets repeated over and over again, like that figure that's always there, but it's in constant motion, so it's always changing, and the challenges are different every single day. I want to say every single couple of stitches. I have to make decisions constantly. So it's a wonderful place. It also can be horrifying, but I love it, and I love it so dearly, that's it.
Thank you. A few more questions are coming in. This one is from Diane. Is it easy to let your pieces go once you think you've finished them, or do you get attached to some you don't want to part with?
This work, it's very interesting because I do some other things. I do drawings and I make collages, and those I make for myself, and those aren't shown to anybody, or they haven't been up till now. My fiber is made for the world. It's my way of relating with the world. It's not made for me. I don't expect to keep them, but I like to have the last piece that I made, and I like to live with it if I can for maybe 6 months, a year, because when I'm done, I know about as much of the piece as you do. I become an observer, just like the people who look at my work are observing it. So I want to make a relationship with it myself. There are a few pieces, like Nancy has a piece right now that when the exhibit was going to open, I haven't finished it. I was working on it until the opening. I brought it in, it was done, and I never saw it again. I don't know that piece. I look at it in the catalog and I don't really know it because I didn't get to live with it long enough. So I do like to live with them for a while, but then they are meant to go if that happens. I have some work up, that hasn't sold yet, but if somebody buys it, I'll be pleased, and it'll be ready to go.
Thank you. Here is a question from Susan. Do you ever abandon a piece?
I have a couple of times. And pieces that I worked on maybe for a month. I mean, I know at least there was one I worked on for at least a month. There was a piece, I knew too much about it. I got myself in a corner. I don't know how it happened, but it started going up. You can't quite see it, but in and out. And I saw that I couldn't do anything else. I would just have to keep going in and out and in. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And I tried to think, well, could I change it this way? Can I throw it off? Can I just throw? I couldn't. The only thing I could see, and I threw it away. I actually threw it away. I was not going to spend that much time making something that I already knew what it was going to look like, and it was too boring. I would be bored. A second piece I threw away. I can't remember why I threw that one away. There's something in this process. I'll say this. When I make a decision, I don't exactly know what effect that decision is going to have on the piece. I might not see the effect for another 4 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches. And then I go, oh my God, look what I did. And sometimes I think it's a mistake. I said, oh, why did I do that? No, this is not good. But if I took out all my mistakes, I would never finish anything. So what I do is I live with what I make, what's there, And then I try to compensate, or I try to add something here to straighten it out, and that's how the pieces are built. They're built with things that I love about them. They're built with things that I don't like about them, with mistakes. And hopefully by the end, the only thing I ask for by the end is that it's alive in some way, that it has life. And of course, I don't want it to be horrible. But none of the ones I finished, I ever had that feeling about. They always have something in them that have meaning to me, and hopefully to others, to people, you know, who are here today.
Thank you. We have a few more questions. This one is, are the pieces ever animal, vegetable, or mineral? I gather, are your pieces always unobjective, not objective, or?
Oh, no, they're all, well, Lillian wrote about that in the, you could almost answer that, Lillian. They have a lot to do. You know, let me say something too. What I serve in myself is something feminine. I'm always looking for, I think, a feminine voice. And my work connects me in some way to the body, to nature, and even the abstract. I don't know. It's not, you know, I can't say. I wouldn't say mineral. Like, they don't look like rocks to me. Let's say animal. What was it? Mineral. I don't see rocks when I see, but I see the earth. I definitely see the earth. I see the earth. I see something coming out of the earth. They're very earth-bound in a way, related to aspects of the earth and water and the body and the organs in the body, the interior workings of our bodies.
Thank you. Okay, here. Oh, yeah.
One more question.
Yes, sure. Okay. Here's one. Was it difficult to learn to trust your unconscious and work in the moment when you first began making your art?
Well, I think the dream is what changed everything. That dream put me at home with my unconscious. It put me at home in that world that comes out of my own unconscious. I don't even want to call it the unconscious, because, well, it is. But it's so archetypal and it's so vast. It contains everything over time. It contains history. It contains, you know, prehistory. It contains the planets. It contains. So the unconscious has this universal aspect to it, and I don't know when I learned to trust. I think it was when I had that dream, and I was in therapy. And therapy, I was in a kind of therapy that opened me up to something universal. I have to say, you know, it came out of Jung. And Jung, thank God for Jung, because he really lived in his own imagination. And I could see that I could live individually out of my own imagination. And the point was to take it as deep as I could. And it's scary. It's not easy, but it's so rich. So I would answer your question by saying, if you believe in the richness of it, if you can find living in the richness of it, you'll be fine, because it's so rich.
I just want to read one final statement of yours, and we will end our gallery talk with this. Doing work of this kind makes me feel a deep connection to a timeless past that emerges out of the earth. I am a link in bringing this ancient way of being into my own time, hopefully making it relevant and helping it as an art form and helping to nurture it into the future. Ferne, thank you very much. We love your exhibition, and I'm so glad that you were able to be here.